Hello and welcome back to Bicycle Legs and another panel. And today we're going to be doing a part two of one we did a couple of months ago, where we're going to be talking about three favorite cover versions. So we have some returning champions from that last cover versions panel, and we have a couple of people who are here for the first time on this one. So should be interesting to see what everybody picks. Thank you, gentlemen, all for joining me for this one today. Really appreciate it. And let's get straight into it. And we will start with Mr. Todd Evans. And what is your first cover version that you want to pick for today?
Okay, well, on the last show, I saved this for my third one, and this time I'm going to change things up. And this artist, anyway, sure, and just get it out of the way first. And it's the Neil Morse Band's version of "Bridge Over Troubled Water." It was on their album "Innocence in Danger" that came out last year, I think, and there's alternate cover, which I think is better. But this version is just amazing. It's one of the coolest things about it is that it starts out with a very kind of a prog rock, faster version of the variation of the theme that you hear at the end and the string arrangement at the end of "Bridge Over Troubled Water." So I'm not going to sing it for you, and I can't play it for you, but think about how that song ends. And the beginning of this song is like 2.5, 3 minutes of like a little overture based on that. So when you get to the end and it gets to that part, because the first time I heard it, I was like, where have I heard this? Where have I heard this melody? Where have I heard it? And then when it gets to the end, you're like, oh, it's that part. Really clever. Three vocalists, of course, Neil Morse, Bill Hubauer, and Eric Gillette. And so lots of key changes, an epic guitar solo. Faithful to the original version, but also a lot wilder and a lot more happening. I remember before this album came out, the bass player Randy George, his wife, was on Facebook, and she said, "Well, I heard one song from the album, and it's cover of Bridge Over Troubled Water." And I was like, "Okay, well, I already know I like that one." Before I even hear it. So that's my first one, "Bridge Over Troubled Water" by the Neil Morse Band from 2021.
Oh, very nice. Yeah, definitely have to check that one out. I mean, again, I think we mentioned this on the first show. Neil Morse has done so many cover versions. Like he and
Yeah.
Randy and Mike Portnoy have done 3 albums of just cover versions. And there's
Right.
so many good ones on those too.
And Transatlantic has 7 or 8. So
exactly. So yeah, no, wonderful choice. Thanks for that.
thanks.
Next we're going to go to John Clauser. John,
All
what do you
right.
have for us today for your first choice?
All right. So 2 of my picks are going to be kind of little history time with me. So these really go back to as far back as my childhood. My family had a friend who cleaned out jukeboxes. So we usually got a lot of 45s and stuff like that. So this one particular one, as a kid, I recognized the name of the artist because as a Sesame Street kid, I remembered seeing this artist performing one of their bigger songs on Sesame Street. And it was like one of the most mind-blowing things I ever saw when I was a little kid. And it's still mind-blowing to watch if you can find it on YouTube. So I recognized this person's name. So I actually knew this song before I even heard the original version. And I'm talking about Stevie Wonder, and from the Signed, Sealed, and Delivered album, the Beatles, "We Can Work It Out."
Wow.
Yeah, this was, I knew this before I knew the Beatles' version of it. But yeah, it's very Stevie Wondered, pretty much is about the best way to describe it. It doesn't sound anything really like the original. You got that nice little harmonica solo going on in there. And it's just, I don't know, it just has a really nice feel to it. And I always liked it as a kid. I kind of like that version almost more than I like the Beatles' actually. So there's my first surprise choice, Stevie Wonder's "We Can Work It Out."
Oh no, that's a great choice. I actually have the album Signed, Sealed, and Delivered because I'm a massive Stevie Wonder fan. And yeah, I can absolutely agree that that's a great version of that song. And I tell you what, I am one of these people that is very leery of Beatles covers because I'm the most ridiculous Beatles fan there is. And there's so many terrible Beatles covers out there.
Most
So
of them.
so it's great to hear a good one. And Stevie Wonder's We Can Work It Out definitely is a good one.
That was one of the better ones. Yes, I agree.
Wonderful choice. Thank you. Okay, we'll hand it over to Reed Little. Reed, wonderful to have you back on the channel. What's your first choice for cover version?
Well, thank you for inviting me. I've been looking forward to this. Now, in order to make this a little extra more fun for myself, I decided to pick one cover from each of 3 categories. So the first category is the faithful cover. My definition of the faithful cover was that it sounds very much like the original, but updates the production, new instrumentation. Usually the most noticeable change is the singer, right? Sometimes the music can sound very faithful, but you have a new singer. And June is Jorn month. So I chose a cover by Jorn. I get to talk about Jorn a lot this month. I just made that up. Jorn did 4 albums of covers, including this one called Unlocking the Past. It was released only in Japan, so that people, I don't know why, he did an album of covers. He's also done 2 called Heavy Rock Radio and an album of nothing but Dio covers. So I actually would put literally any of the album or of the songs on those 4 albums on my favorite covers, but in particular, I'm choosing his cover of Thin Lizzy's Cold Sweat from 1983. Now, this is one that hard rock and metal bands love to cover because it's probably the most heavy metal thing Thin Lizzy ever recorded, written by John Sykes, along with Phil Lynott on their 83 album Thunder and Lightning. But for me, the Thin Lizzy original is very strident. It's frantic. It feels like they're rushing the entire song, like the players are just on the edge of not being able to play it. Whereas Phil Lynott's vocal is very standard Phil. It's very laid back. It's very understated. And in fact, that plays with some tension against the music. The Jorn version is very much all of one piece. Now, it was recorded in 2004. So in those 21 years, you get a very different sound, but it sounds immaculate. The bass sounds amazing. The guitars sound amazing. The drum sounds amazing. And of course, Jorn has a very different delivery. Imagine Dio singing Thin Lizzy songs and you're not too far off. But it never sounds frantic and rushed. They sound like they are laid back and grooving in the pocket. So it just gives the song a completely different feel. Still very faithful to the original version, but it feels different and the production is updated.
Wonderful. I'll have to check that one out because I don't know that one at all. So yeah, thanks for that. Sounds really, really good. Okay, we'll hand it over to Grant Arthur from Grant's Rock Warehouse. And
Thanks for
what do
having me,
you have for
bicyclelegs.
us? Always a pleasure.
Well, tonight we're going back. Well, the first recorded version of this song was in 1979. It was composed by Christy McCall, who, if you remember, she sang backup in the Pogues. She did some cover songs. She's a top-notch writer in herself, and she tragically had an accident, and golly, probably 20 years ago now. Maybe she's been gone, but absolutely brilliant songwriter. But her version of this song did not take off. So she recorded in 1979, and when you compare both of these versions, they're kind of similar, but Tracy Ullman had a hit with it in 1983. It got to #2 in the UK and #8 in the States. Kirsty's version didn't go anywhere, but the song is They Don't Know, which I think is just a brilliant pop song, wonderfully produced by Peter Collins. I mean, it could have fit. I think it's so brilliant. You could have had Paul McCartney could have written this song. In fact, he was in the video with Tracy Ullman at the end. But I think it's on that level of songwriting. Catchy, beautiful choruses, beautiful production. It's kind of that 60s kind of vein. It would have fit in well in that, even though it's much more of a modern production. And, I think that's the only single Tracy ever had a hit with, I think. I don't know. But she sounds great singing it. I think it's great. 3 minutes of pop bliss, gentlemen.
Yeah, well, of course, Tracy Ullman was mostly known as being a comedian and
Right.
actor. She she did do a few albums, but as I said, I think that was the only big hit that she had. So
The Kirsty MacColl version, though, is just as great, I
yeah.
think.
Oh,
I mean, there's
definitely
not
is.
much difference, but it's just funny how Tracy was able to take the song and actually get a hit out of it. I don't
Yeah.
know. Well, thank God for that. So that's my first choice.
Excellent choice too. Great. Okay, I'll hand it over to John the Music Nut. John, always a pleasure to have you on the channel.
you.
What do you have for us for your first cover version?
All right, thank you. So if you've been following any videos I've been a part of in the last 6 months, these choices will not be a surprise to you. And with all three of these songs, they really stick to the original, but there's a lot more blood and fire to each one of them. And my first one was originally recorded in 1971, written by Rod Stewart, one of his best songs in my humble opinion. But I'll tell you what, the Georgia Satellites did a cover of Every Picture Tells a Story on their self-titled debut album, and it is a fantastic version. It's got a lot more guts to it. It's a lot more spirited and rowdy, and it's a great version. I think it's better than the original. Original's still great, don't get me wrong, but Every Picture Tells a Story, Georgia Satellites, they did a lot of covers, but this is their best by far, in my opinion. And that's my number one, Georgia Satellites, Every Picture Tells a Story, 1986. Thanks.
Excellent. No,
Woohoo.
good choice.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, my first choice is a song that was originally recorded by the Spencer Davis Group in 1967. And then it was covered 2 years later by a band on their very first album. The band was Chicago Transit Authority. Later, of course, to be known as Chicago. And the song is I'm a Man. And they just do an absolutely blistering version of this song. The funny thing is, though, that they were, this was obviously this is like, 30 years pre-internet. So they didn't have a website that they could go to find the lyrics to the song. So they just had to sort of listen to the record and try and work out the lyrics, and they didn't quite get them right, but they still sound really good on this record. And there's just some absolutely incredible guitar playing from Terry Kath on this version of this song. I love this version. This copy of this album, by the way, I bought when I was 14 years old at like a trash and treasure part of a school fete that I went to, and it cost me the grand sum of 50 cents.
Nice.
And that's how I became a Chicago fan, with this album and Chicago 5. I bought them both for 50 cents each at that trash and treasure. So I've loved this version of I'm a Man ever since. I mean, the Spencer Davis version group is absolutely wonderful too. But for me, the Chicago version is just a little bit better, a little bit more energetic. As I say, the Terry Kath guitar playing in it, I think, is what puts it over the top for me as compared with the Spencer Davis group version. Because, I mean, Terry, we lost him way too soon. But man, that guy could play guitar. So yeah, there's my first choice. I'm a Man by Chicago Transit Authority. Okay, hand it back to Todd for your second choice.
Okay, I just want to add that the best first two Chicago records to buy, of course, are CTA and Chicago 5, in my opinion. But so you started off right. Okay, so this next song, I hope, is not one of the Beatles covers that bicyclelegs doesn't like. We'll find out in a minute. I'm talking about Tomorrow Never Knows from Phil Collins from Face Value. And when I wanted to pick this, I actually was afraid that somebody picked it on the last version of the show, so I had to watch the show to make sure that nobody did. But this version is it's pretty faithful to the original. And when you think about how trippy the original version is, you'd think that that'd be a pretty hard thing to do. But it's, you know, the gated drums and Phil's vocals are just about the only thing that's different. And it's funny because I listened to the original, the Beatles version today as well to compare them. And the drums on that version are really good and really, really well recorded and really loud in the mix. And so I used to consider the Phil Collins version as the better sounding version, but I'm not really sure of that anymore because I think they both sound really good. But on the original version, John Lennon sang his vocals through a Leslie cabinet, and there's all of this backward stuff happening. And I think a lot of the same, if Phil Collins didn't do it the same way, he made it sound pretty much the same. So I think it's a really good version. It's surprisingly good. You know, everybody, I'm going to get on my soapbox for a minute. People tend to like to make fun of Phil Collins, but the first 3-4 Phil Collins albums have something in them that's really cool. And this is I think the cool thing about Face Value is that it has that cover. You know, the third album has an epic Eric Clapton guitar solo on it. And so there are, you know, every album has its little thing that makes it cooler than advertised. And I think his version of Tomorrow Never Knows is that for this album. What do you think, bicyclelegs?
I actually do quite like that version, yeah. And I've got to say, I like the first few Phil Collins solo albums too, but I don't think he ever topped Face Value. I mean, that album
probably not.
You know,
probably not.
I think too, you know, the people who will poo-poo Phil Collins will grudgingly accept that Face Value is actually a pretty good album. So
I'll take it.
Yeah. No, I do like that version. So yeah, no, it's a really good choice. Okay, John Clauser, your next choice.
I'm glad we're 2 for 2 on the Beatles covers. That's good. So my second choice, again, this is one that I grew up with. Again, having a brother and sister who are 13 and 15 years older than me helped expose me to a lot of pretty good music, and this particular band was no exception. So this hard rocking band took a nice little pretty little folk song about some insecurity kind of stuff, and they just supercharged rocked it out. And so the original was found on the Blue album by Joni Mitchell, and I am talking about Nazareth from the Loud and Proud album, This Flight Tonight. Again, I never knew the original, I think, until not too long ago. I finally decided to listen to it, and I was like, oh, this is a nice, pretty folky song. But yeah, I've known the Nazareth version since I was a little kid. It was also on a K-Tel album that I still have to this day, that I grew up with. And I just absolutely, I think Dane McCafferty's voice is just great on that song. I love that chugging rhythm. It's just, to me, it's just a wonderful song by Nazareth. So there you go. This Flight Tonight.
Yeah, that's a good choice. And I mean, I do love Joni Mitchell's original too, because I'm a huge Joni Mitchell fan. I definitely need to get more of her records though. I've only got a few, and I need to collect more and more of them, because the ones I've got are just so absolutely wonderful. But yeah, no, that's a good choice. And I do, you know, there's a few cover versions. I won't sort of spoil in case anybody chooses it, but you know, there's a few of those sort of songs that are more folky or you know, quieter songs that ended up getting really rocked up by hard rock and metal bands. I think you can think of some of the ones I'm talking about, but I won't mention any of them in case, as I say, somebody does decide to pick one of those. So, but yeah, no, that's a good choice. I like it. Reed, what's your second choice?
Okay, second category is cover songs where the cover basically replaces the original song in the public consciousness. These are usually pretty faithful but often performed by bigger artists or perhaps just at a different period of time. Grant was talking about a song earlier that kind of fits that mold. It's pretty common. Just like this is a band that's pretty common, but one that I almost never talk about, even though they were a huge part of my heavy metal fandom when I was in high school and college. That band is going to be Metallica. And on this CD, they covered a little song called Am I Evil? Now, Diamond had originally recorded Am I Evil in 1980. They had apparently performed it on TV in 79, recorded it in 80, and again in 81 or 82. Metallica did a cover of it and released it as the B-side to Creeping Death in 1984. Well, it's a very faithful cover of it. I mean, very faithful. The guitar sound is very similar. Even James Hetfield's vocal delivery is not very far off of the way the singer in Diamond Head. I don't know anything about Diamond Head, so I don't know their singer's name. Sorry. But it's a very faithful cover. And because almost nobody in America had heard this song, everybody went, wow, that's a fantastic song. And because people generally haven't ever paid attention to the credits, nobody realized that it wasn't Metallica's song. Plus, Diamond Head were such a huge influence on Metallica, and even more an ongoing influence on Dave Mustaine and Megadeth, that style of music was so incorporated into their sound anyway, it sounds like them. So that had the perverse effect that when Diamond Head would later perform that song, people would accuse them of ripping off Metallica, which just had to irritate them to no end. But on the flip side, Diamond Head had a very short, very painful career. They crashed and burned. They made no impact in the States. And if Metallica hadn't covered their song, nobody would ever know who Diamond Head is, except for the people that were just, like Martin Popoff, who's an absolute completionist about the new wave of British heavy metal. So, the sword cuts both ways, right? But one of life's little ironies. Nonetheless, it's a fantastic song. Metallica did a fantastic cover of it, but it absolutely replaced Diamond Head's original cover, unless you're among that particular kind of heavy metal hipster that's like, I was into Diamond Head before anybody else. You do you.
No, good choice. That Kill 'Em All that you showed there.
Right.
I mentioned this on a show that I did on Rock Daydream Nation with Peter Kerr. We were doing a show about like bargain records that we'd picked up. And I actually, in the last couple of months, managed to pick up a 1987 pressing, which was the first pressing here in Australia of Kill 'Em All for $15.
Oh, very nice. And
Wow.
it did not have, I bet it didn't have Am I Evil, right? Because that first appeared on the 88 pressings.
I'm not sure. I'd have to go and check that. But no, the one I've got actually had a misprint on the label too. The song Jump in the Fire was actually printed on the label as Jump in the Air.
Huh. Okay.
Oops. Yeah.
Collectible.
So there you go. No, that's a wonderful choice. There's a lot of cover versions like that, isn't there, where like people don't even know that it's a cover version because the song that they're covering was a relatively obscure song to begin with.
Right. Or ironically, sometimes it's not even that. Like when Jimi Hendrix covered All Along the Watchtower, Dylan's version of All Along the Watchtower was still a very well-known song. It's just that Jimi Hendrix wiped it out of public consciousness and took over that song forever.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and Hendrix thing came out, 68? And Jimmy came out, Jimmy came out, I think that was at 68, and then Dylan's version was 67. It hadn't been out that long, so yeah, it was still in public consciousness,
Yeah. And as I mentioned on the first show, I also really like XTC's cover of All Along the Watchtower because that's really different again.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that one.
No, it's a very strange cover version, but I absolutely love it. Grant, your second
Yes, sir.
choice.
All right, well, we're going back into that pop bliss thing. We're getting away from Metallica. I'm going completely in the opposite direction. So we're going back to a song that was written in 1970 by Roger Nichols and Paul Williams. Paul Williams did the lyrics. Roger Nichols wrote the music. It was originally recorded by Smokey Roberts, who no one has ever heard of. And then, see, there you go. Evidently he went under the singing name of Freddie Allen. Anyway, this song eventually got picked up for a commercial. Crocker National Bank in California picked it up. And on that version, Paul Williams sang the vocal. So we're talking a song that ended up on an ad. So what had happened is that Richard Carpenter, the Carpenters, heard it and went, "Oh my God, that's great." He met Paul Williams in the parking lot of A&M Records. They were both signed to A&M at the time. And he approached Paul about it and asked him about this song that he heard and wanted to know if there was a bridge. Is there additional lyrics? Is there another verse? And Paul told Richard Carpenter, yeah, there was. But Richard Carpenter was so taken by the song that he decided to do it for the Carpenters. And of course, we have Karen Carpenter's lovely vocal. And the track is We've Only But Just Begun, which, if you listen to it, out of all the Carpenters tracks, her vocal on that, and we know anything Karen Carpenter could sing would be absolutely mesmerizing, stunning. It doesn't matter. She could read, people say, well, she could have read it out of the phone book, the newspaper. And that's true. But yeah, We've Only Just Begun, which is classic, beautiful song. It still stands up. I'm just kind of heading in that pop vein tonight.
Yeah.
I still love it. I could listen to that track over and over again and never get tired of it. It's just beautiful, absolutely brilliant songwriting on that.
Yeah.
So there you go, kids. That's my number 2.
No, it's a beautiful choice. Carpenters, it's been wonderful to see in the last few years, they really have been reevaluated. That they used to be sort of seen as mushy, soft, elevator music, but now people are really recognizing them for the beautiful pop music that they were. And I think that's a wonderful thing. So yeah, it's great to see the Carpenters.
It's just magical, that stuff. It's great.
Getting the respect that I think they've always deserved.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think Richard Carpenter is such a genius. He may not be of Earth. Sometimes I wonder if he became here for another planet, because the way he envisions those arrangements are like nobody else would have done.
Well, if you look at the
copied him after that.
If you look at the Carpenters, like I'm looking at if you look at the 45 sleeve, they're just kids. They're young, and look at it's the beautiful arrangements. Like, Todd said, the musicianship, I think they were using the Wrecking Crew a lot on this, but still Richard Carpenter was running the show on all this stuff. Absolutely. And you have to admit, man, there's something there to it. It still lasts all these years.
Yeah.
So,
no, beautiful choice. Thank you, Grant.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, John the Music Nut, what is your second choice for cover versions?
All right, thank you. Well, now, more great cover songs by wonderful British songwriters. This was originally recorded in 1967. It was written by Ray Davies on the album by the Kinks called Something Else by the Kinks. Here is the 2-disc version that was released with the mono and stereo version. And while I love that version, here you go, Daniel.
Oh, yes.
I love the Jams version on All Mod Cons from 1978. It sticks to the original. Big difference. They play it with a lot more passion. And on here, it's Bruce Foxton's harmonies added to Paul Weller's voice that took a great song and turned it into an anthem, in my opinion. I think this is one of the great cover songs, certainly one of the great jam songs as well. And Paul Weller wrote so many fantastic songs for the Jam. So that's my number 2. It's David Watts. If I didn't mention the song, it's David Watts by the Jam.
Wonderful. Lovely choice. And just for anybody who may not know, John the Music Nut and I did a studio albums ranked on the Jam. It was a wonderful show, really enjoyed it, and I will leave a link in the description to that if you want to go and have a look at that. So please do, because it was a really fun show to do. And yeah, absolutely great song. Funnily enough, my second choice is also going to be a cover of a Kinks song. And the song in question is one of their very first songs, if not their first, is a song called You Really Got Me. And that came out in, I think, 1965, 64, 65, I can't remember. And then in 1980, it was covered on the debut album, and this will not come as a surprise. I am a huge fan of sacrilegious cover versions by new wave bands, where they take a classic song and just completely rearrange it into a completely new wave way of doing it. And the album is Only a Lad by Oingo Boingo. And on this, they do a cover of You Really Got Me. And they completely Oingo Boingo that song, so that you don't necessarily, if you don't know the song, you wouldn't necessarily know it was a cover, because it sounds so Oingo Boingo. It has that wonderful maniacal delivery by Danny Elfman in the vocal. It's got the strange quirkiness of the guitars and the keyboards, and you've got the horns as well. Just an absolutely wonderful sacrilegious new wave cover version. You know, much like, I mean, in the first show I picked Satisfaction by Devo, and I picked Ring of Fire by Wall of Voodoo. This one, absolutely right up there with those two as far as I'm concerned, as far as completely different new wave cover versions of songs. So that's my number two, You Really Got Me by Oingo Boingo. All right, Todd, your third and final choice.
Okay, well, the song I'm about to talk about was was left off of it was an outtake from this album by REM, Fables of the Reconstruction, and it came out eventually on Dead Letter Office, which is a collection of their B-sides. But first, it was the B-side of Driver 8 from Fables, and I thought I had that 45 to show, but I couldn't find it. I had Can't Get There From Here, but I didn't have Driver 8. But the song I'm talking about is Crazy, and it's a cover by Athens band, cover of a song by Athens band Pylon. And you know how much I like Pylon, and Grant and I have talked about Pylon a whole lot. And the REM version it's a pretty danceable song. Pylon was kind of a dance rock band, and they were I don't want to, that's probably doesn't do them justice. They were very quirky and high energy. Pylon was. And the REM version, because it's an outtake from Fables of the Reconstruction, it's produced by Joe Boyd. So it has the REM version of Crazy has the kind of murky kind of production that Fables has. It's a little bit I've always thought that all the songs recorded for Fables sounded very Southern. They're very they sound very organic. And so the REM version of the song Crazy is much it's still got high energy, but it's a little mellower and it's a little more atmospheric than the Pylon version. But if you've never heard it, it's great. When the Pylon version came out, REM had just recorded their Chronic Town EP, and there's a quote from Michael Stipe where he heard the Pylon song Crazy on the radio and thought, because the Pylon song came out in 1981, and he thought, man, their record is so much better than ours. And so that's why he wanted REM to do a cover of it. But that's my last pick, Crazy by REM.
I love that. I mean, that Dead Letter Office album is just so much fun too, with all the different big
It
songs
is.
and stuff on it. I mean, you know, there's some very serious REM stuff on there, but then, you know, I mean, REM always got pegged as being a very sort of po-faced and serious band. and you go and listen to some of the songs on that Dead Letter Office album, and you can really hear that there's, that band had a sense of humor too. And,
Yeah.
it's great to hear that and hear that other side of the band, I think. Underrated
Yeah,
album in the catalog, that compilation.
Yeah, when Dead Letter Office came out, I was working in a record store in suburban Atlanta, and Mike Mills's dad used to come in, and he would just, say, show me everything you have of REM. And he would come in and buy REM everything. And when the song, I think it's South Central Rain, the B-side of that was King of the Road, which is a cover of the Roger Williams. Is that right?
Roger
Do I have
Miller.
that right? It's the
Roger
right guy?
Miller.
But Roger Miller, thank you. And it was if you've never heard that cover version, it's like they don't know it, and they're just plodding through it, and somebody's in the background going E G, and Mike Mills's dad picked up that 45 and laughed out loud, and he said, "I can't believe that they released that. It's so weird and terrible." And I always remember that. I thought it was funny, but he was quite tickled that REM decided to release their version of King of the Road. Sorry, I didn't mean to get a balance. I didn't mean to get a bonus pick, but
No, that's all right.
Well, I was going to say, Todd, just to follow up with what you said about the Pylon version, the REM version of that, of Crazy, doesn't take anything away from that Pylon version. I
no,
think
it doesn't.
they both can coincide and you both can appreciate them just the same because both versions are brilliant.
Yeah, it's hard to pick a favorite.
No, I love Crazy off the REM one. I think theirs is probably more hit single worthy, maybe. I don't know, but both of them. I suggest anyone, if you haven't heard Pylon, geez, check them out.
Yeah,
Brilliant stuff.
absolutely. Thanks for that one, Todd. Okay, John Clauser, your last pick.
Okay, so this one is not so much from my childhood, but if you remember from the last episode, I mentioned a song from a tribute album that my favorite song from that brought tears to my eyes because it was so beautifully done. And that was, of course, was Black Diamond by Kiss. Well, this one kind of falls in that same kind of vein. I had the privilege of getting to see Robert Plant and Alison Krauss recently, and in their set, they do 3 songs from Led Zeppelin 4, that totally reworked, and it just sounded amazing. They did Rock and Roll, they did Battle of Evermore, and When the Levee Breaks, which was just amazing. I never thought I'd get to see a Zeppelin member in concert until that. So my pick from this one comes from this little tribute album that came out in 1995. And the particular version I'm going from here is also from Led Zeppelin 4. I'm talking about the song Going to California from a little girl duo called Never the Bride. Never heard of them before. Don't really know much about them after that, but there is something about their version of that, the way Nikki Lamborn just sings this. She has this very raspy, almost a mellow kind of Janis Joplin feel to her voice. And the way she delivers the vocal, it brings tears to my eyes. It just is so beautifully done. There's piano background, a little bit of cello and string arrangement, but it's just, I don't know, just something very beautiful about the song. It brings a different kind of feel and vibe to the song. And so there you go. Never the Bride from the Led Zeppelin Enconium tribute album.
I don't know that one. I'm definitely going to have to see if I can find that one to listen to, because that's probably one of my favorite songs on Led Zeppelin 4. Led Zeppelin 4 is a great album, but 2 or 3 of the songs on that album have been so overplayed that I just never want to hear them again. But Going to California is not one of those. It's one of the songs that I can still really, really enjoy on that album.
Mm-hmm.
So it'll be interesting to hear a nice cover version of that. So I'll definitely have to check that one out. Thanks, John.
Yep.
Okay, Reed, your last choice.
Okay, well, the last couple of picks actually lead into my third category. Something that I call The Song Retains the Name. based on the name of a Led Zeppelin tribute album that a friend of mine had in college that was all reggae covers of Led Zeppelin songs. So the song retains the name. Basically, it takes usually the lyrics of the song and nothing else, just changes everything else about it. And the other band that I've been talking about a lot this month is one of my favorite heavy metal bands, Nevermore. But in this case, I'm going with Nevermore's lead singer, the departed Warrell Dane. He put out a solo album called Praises to the War Machine. There are 2 cover songs on them. One is a faithful cover of the Sisters of Mercy's Lucretia, My Reflection. And one is a song retains the name cover of a very obscure Paul Simon number called Patterns.
Oh, I love that song.
Well, I hate the Paul Simon version of it. Like most folk versions, I think it's gutless. It has fabulous lyrics. Paul sings them with what it's kind of conviction. Warrell Dane's version of it buries Paul Simon's version, although it is heavy metal. But the thing about Warrell Dane is he lived a horrible life. He had a lot of incidents. He had a girlfriend that joined a cult and ran off and was never seen again, possibly murdered by the cult. He doesn't know. He had a lot of substance abuse problems. He had a lot of problems in his family. And he took all of that pain and put it into his art. And the vocals that he does on Patterns are this literal existential, just screaming about finding the meaning of life and looking for these patterns. And he gives that song a meaning that Paul Simon could never have imbued the song with. Now, it also happens to be a kick-ass heavy metal song. It's got Pete Witchers from Soilwork playing guitar on it, and he just rips. So you're talking about a very different experience. But I had to track down the Paul Simon song. I listened to it and went, well, in relation, Warrell Dane on the scale of 1 to 10, he's like a 9 on the emotional pain level, whereas Paul Simon's like a 1.5. He's singing about patterns. Paul Simon's a fantastic lyricist. And Nevermore and Warrell Dane covered a lot of Paul Simon and a lot of the Doors because fantastic lyrics. But the things they did with those songs just gave them a completely different meaning. Sadly, Warrell Dane did not find meaning in life. He died of a heart attack, probably due to complications from his lifelong drug overdose at a relatively young age. I think he was in his early 50s. So a very poignant song by a very damaged individual who died early, and all of that just gives it extra weight. So if you want a screaming heavy metal version of a folk song with fantastic lyrics, Praises to the War Machine, the song is Patterns.
I will definitely have to check that out because, unlike you, I am a huge Simon and Garfunkel fan. And so I'll be very interested to hear what that version of Patterns is like, because I do think Patterns is a wonderful song.
Now, I have to say, I have not listened to the Simon and Garfunkel version. Paul Simon recorded the version of the song twice. In '66, he recorded it on the Paul Simon songbook.
Yes.
And then in '67, he recorded it with Simon and Garfunkel. So those are possibly very different songs.
Yeah. So yeah, no, definitely. No, really good. I'm definitely going to have to check that out. Thanks for that, Reed. Grant, what is your last choice?
All right, my last choice. I've been looking at my list. I'm trying to decide what I want to go with because, like I said, this is a hard exercise. I'm going to go with something no one's probably even expecting, but this song was popularized by Frank Sinatra of all people in 1969. In fact, the song originally was written by a French artist, and Paul Anka heard it when he was on holiday, and Paul Anka rewrote the lyrics to it. So it was all kind of, I think Elvis did a version of it. I don't think Paul Anka ever did a version of it, but the version of it is my way, and I'm going to go with the Sid Vicious version on rock and roll, the soundtrack to, what was it, Rock and Roll
The Great
Swindle?
Rock and Roll
Great
Swindle,
Rock
yeah.
and Roll Swindle from what? God, that was post, I think
79,
this
I think.
79. So the pistols were done by them. But in fact, I think when they were compiling this, they used Sid's version. I think it was like 3 weeks before he passed away. But come on, we always talk about God Save the Queen or some Ramones song, Blitzkrieg Bop or Clash. But come on, what's more punk than Sid Vicious doing a punk version of My Way? I mean, he's basically just flipping everyone off. It's just sneering. It's just nasty. It's bratty. It's just total punk. 4 minutes of punk bliss. And I don't think people ever mention it enough. I think it's a classic. I think when Sid was recording it, he meant every word. His performance, how you even take it. I mean, it was sped up to some degree. Some of the lyrics were changed. It's just total punk. To me, that song, that cover sums up punk. You could just show me that, and that should explain the punk movement. So
Yeah.
I'm just gonna give My Way by Sid Vicious some love.
No, that's a good choice.
I mean, I heard that. I heard that when I was a kid. When I first got turned on to the Sex Pistols, it was one of those records I saw in the bin at Musicland. I must have been 13 or something, and it had Sex Pistol. Ooh, thought, well, maybe I could. I don't know what it is exactly, but sounds kind of,
naughty.
wonder if I can get it in the house. And I did, but I loved it. And then I just ended up getting Great Rock and Roll Swindle and just was totally taken by that soundtrack and Sid Vicious and his performance. God, it was like a big influence when I was a kid.
When
Maybe
I
it
was
was
in
like
high
an O.J.
school,
Simpson thing, and he was describing how he killed Nancy.
Maybe.
Too soon?
when I was in high school, me and my friends thought that Rock and Roll Swindle album was the greatest thing ever. And of course, a whole bunch of it is awful. But back then, man,
We
I thought
loved
that
it.
was the greatest thing ever.
Well, the sequencing on it's really good. Yeah, there's some bits on there that, like I could even have mentioned the Sex Pistols doing I'm Not Your Stepping Stone.
Yeah.
Their version of Roadrunner, killer.
Yeah.
But yeah, Todd, I'm with you. When I heard that when I was a kid, we just played it all the time. I played that more than Nevermind the Bullocks. It's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the funny thing. With the actual song My Way, before Paul Anka wrote lyrics for it, there were a couple of other people who tried to write English lyrics for that tune. And one of them was David Bowie. And his version got rejected by the publishers. But it inspired him to then go and write one of his best songs ever, which is Life on Mars. So there you go. Because if you listen to the sort of the chord progression at the beginning of Life on Mars, it's very similar to My Way. But then it goes off on a complete Bowie tangent after that.
Right. Well, My Way will never be the same after Sid.
No, I agree.
Version.
I agree.
May he rest in peace.
Okay, John the Music Nut, what is your last choice for a cover version?
All right, thank you. Well, I have been privileged to be part of a wonderful series on My Music Corner with my friend John Clauser. We've been reviewing the entire Wasp discography. Wasp Wednesday is the name of the show. We got a couple more shows before we wrap it up and go on to some more wonderful bands. And this band covered a song by the fantastic songwriter that is Pete Townsend. It was originally on the 1973 album Quadrophenia. And the song I'm talking about is on this album, another wonderful album, The Headless Children. And the song is The Real Me. Now, The Real Me, this is a more spirited version. Blackie Lawless sings the heck out of it. Johnny Rod does an amazing tribute to John Entwistle with the very creative and busy bass lines on it. Frankie Banali is a monster on the drums here that Keith Moon did originally. And of course, Chris Holmes and Blackie with the amazing guitar work on it as well. This is a fantastic song, fantastic version. In my opinion, I think it has the eclipse to Who's version. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a big Wasp fan. I'm a big Who fan too. But you can't go wrong with The Real Me. Spectacular. This was released in 1989. This was their first of their more serious albums. And don't just judge Wasp by those early Blood and Guts albums, although there are a lot of great songs on those albums. Headless Children was a step forward, and The Real Me, spectacular version.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, my last choice is going to be a song on the first show I obviously talked about Devo's cover of Satisfaction. Well, this cover version that I'm going to be talking about is a cover version not by Devo but of Devo.
Nice.
And it was an obscure Devo B-side that was covered by this particular band, so much so that I think a lot of fans of this band probably wouldn't even realize that it was a cover version. They would just assume that it was an original song by the band. The band is Nirvana, and the song is Turnaround.
Nice.
Now, Turnaround was the B-side, I think, of Whip It. I could be wrong there. Or it could have been Girl You Want. It was one of those two. And
It was Whip It, yeah.
yeah. And it's a great song. It you know, almost one of those songs that you think was too good to be left off the album and just used as a B-side. But Nirvana covered it. They covered it in a very grunge way, as you would expect, because that was their style of music. But they do it really well. Because the lyric of the song Turnaround is quite an angry lyric. So it suits Kurt Cobain really, really well. And I mean, the other reason I love this cover version, apart from the fact that in and of itself, it's just a really good cover version, is that, you know, in the early 90s before this sort of happened, and Soundgarden also covered Girl You Want around about this time as well. Devo were considered a bit of a joke. They were considered a bit of a you know, novelty band. And, you know, you had bands like Nirvana and Soundgarden covering Devo songs. It really restored, you know, much like with the Carpenters, you know, it restored their credibility. And so, you know, I'm eternally grateful for bands like Nirvana and Soundgarden for covering Devo songs and bringing them back into the consciousness of serious music, you know, and that's really great. And the funny thing is too, with the Soundgarden version of Girl You Want, Devo then did a version of Girl You Want that was very much in the style of Soundgarden's cover, and that appears on the Tank Girl soundtrack. So that's well worth checking out as well. But yeah, that's my last pick, Nirvana covering Turnaround by Devo.
Yeah, if Turnaround is not the fastest Devo song, it's a contender.
Yes.
It's a very speedy little song.
So there you go, everybody. That's our 3 favorite cover versions, part 2. Please let us know in the comments which of these you like and which ones maybe you don't care for so much. And also, please let us know your favorite cover versions, because we'd really love to see that. I will leave links in the description for My Music Corner and for Grant's Rock Warehouse. If any of my viewers are not subscribed to those 2 channels, please go to the links in the description and subscribe to those 2 channels, because they are wonderful, wonderful channels and have great, great content. Thank you very much to Todd, John Clauser, Reed, Grant, and John the Music Nut for joining me. It's been an absolute honor and a pleasure to have you on the show. Wonderful panel as always. Please do like, share, and subscribe. It really does help the channel out. If you're new to the channel, please go and have a look at some of my other videos. Everything's playlisted, so if you want to go and look at some of my other panels, there's a playlist for those. If you want to look at some of my studio albums ranked shows, there's a playlist for those. If you want to see my appearances on other channels like Grant's Rock Warehouse, I have a playlist for my appearances on other channels, so you can go and check those out as well. If you want to follow me on social media, I'm at bicyclelegs on Instagram and Twitter, and I now have a dedicated Facebook page for bicyclelegs. Links all in the description. Please come and give those a like and join in the conversation. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
Cheers.